is advised.
Hi, welcome to the Scheff Show on UCY TV, Truth Frequency Radio. Yes, it is my birthday. Thank you. The PayPal store is open. Official Stories is for sale, or just send your tasteful, professional semi-nudes to Liam Scheff, care of Liam Scheff at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue for color correction and commentary. Or just buy a book, honestly. Get it on Kindle. It's like $3 to $4. It is a good book. Okay, what do I... Put that away. I'm working, I said to myself. I am reading endlessly about diet and nutrition. I am reading Weston Alfonso Cuarón's, that's not his real name, Weston Abraham Lincoln Price's book, Physical Degeneration, and My Travels Around the World Without Really Understanding What I'm Talking About, I believe was the undertitle. Weston Price seems to be a nice guy. I'm not going to say A every time I say his name. You know who I mean. I'm not going to call him Dr. Price. He's a dentist. I don't call anybody a doctor unless they make me. I think that it's an overused title that makes people feel like they're entitled to all kinds of bullshit. So, he's a bright guy. He went around the world in a short period of years in the 1930s, in his later middle age. He died at 77 or so, a reasonable age. I think he died of a heart attack, but the Weston A. Price Foundation, named for him, not by him, not with him. Really the Sally Fallon Foundation, let's be honest. Sally, don't, be skinny fat like me. Eat fat, get fat. Yeah, okay. Just honestly, if you're going to write a book about getting skinny by eating fat, you know what I'm saying? Okay, that's all right. That's fine. I'm not, yeah. Oh, I know, defender, because she's out there telling people that soy is the same thing as birth control pills. Very reasonable woman, very sane. Yes, very down to earth. Very well balanced, not that she's dumb, but there seems to be a lack of cohesive thought across her critical spectrum. So I'm reading this book, and the guy is interesting. He travels around the world. Now, in the 1930s, the Maori population, and the Maasai, and some Gaelic people, and who else? The Inuits, and some American Indians in Florida and the Pacific Northwest, were all mostly non-farming people, or they were semi-farmers, or they were pastoralists who did some farming, or they were hunters and gatherers who did a lot of gathering. But they hadn't crested the peak into what we call Western civilization. Not that one of them lived in town. One of the groups lived in towns. They were Swiss. They simply lived too far out of the way. It was cold and snowy a lot of the time, I think. So they, didn't really have much of a farming season. So they raised a lot of animals, mostly cows. The Maori, people on islands eat a lot of fish, mostly shellfish, because they're easy to pick. They seem to grow in the sea. Fruits de la mer, as the French would say, fruit of the sea. You just pick them, right? You just pick them. So much for being tough hunters. You just pick them, no big deal. And the seas were clean. There's no reason why they shouldn't be. Unlike now. Who else did we have? Some Florida Indians living in hot, difficult area, eating any kind of reptile they could find, rodent. And the Pacific Northwest, again, an area good for hunting and gathering, very long, hard winters, wet winters. Gotta kill big animals and cut them into a million pieces and boil every part of them and eat it. Okay. And he noticed that they had good teeth. By and large, they all had good teeth, including the mostly vegetarian, including the farming tribe. I think they were Bantu in Africa. Still, good teeth. Very good teeth. He didn't worry about lifespan. Didn't worry about incidents of cannibalism. Didn't worry about rates of infanticide. Didn't worry about birth rate versus death rate. Not really. Just liked to look at teeth and tuberculosis. To his credit, he found that people on these diets had low rates of tuberculosis. Now, people not on these diets were eating the new American industrial British diet, which included pounds of sugar, white sugar. Yes, pounds of white sugar. I think the amount of sugar per capita in the United States went from like a pound in 1800 per household, or per person, to 90 per person per capita, to 90 pounds per person by 1900. So by 1930 it was, going upward to where it is today, hundreds of pounds per year. Oh, right. What is the per capita of sugar right now? Probably 150 pounds per year. Let's look it up. We can do that. We have internet now. For now, unlike the French. No, they do. They just don't have gas right now. Some of them. How many pounds? All you have to write is pounds per sugar per year American. 150. No. For every American who eats only 5 pounds of sugar a year, there is one who eats 295 pounds of sugar per year. Hey! And I said 150. The average American consumes 150 to 170 pounds of sugar per year. Good job, Scheffy boy. Good job. Thanks, friend. Thank you for saying it to me, yourself, and I. Yeah, okay. So the rate went up to 90 pounds in 1900, 150 now. You get the idea. A lot of sugar. Now, sugar causes every disease in the world. Everything. Everything is exacerbated by it. It robs your body of all vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. It's deadly, deadly, deadly poison. So that was in the diet, and it was in the diet of people being provided food by, Western helpful psychopaths and, colonizing Christian psychopaths and all the rest of the good stuff that we've done for the world. So that was in the air, and he noticed that those people children on that diet would develop badly, and it would show in their teeth cavities, and then children of people who were eating those diets would have bad jaw formation. So he decided that returning to the native diet was good. Oh, wow! What's that? Returning to the native diet where you live? That had some value? Get out! Wow, what a genius. Okay, yeah, he was a nice guy. He wasn't a racist. He wasn't a eugenicist like people living that age. A lot of people thought people had problems because they were not white, not European, and they were mixed breeds. So he wasn't saying that, and he deserves credit for that. He decided that people should go back to their native diets. He put them back when he was treating people. He put them on essentially a relatively high-fat, high-protein, meaty, potatoey, vegetable-y, starchy diet, something akin to the standard American diet of the 19-teens, late 1800s, 19-teens, before the total destruction of the food system before and after World War II, certainly after. And he found that people's cavities healed better, which, is interesting and should be good news to everybody. Now, getting down to the central axis of the research, it turns out that there are fats that contain vitamins that are difficult to get in anything but animal foods. Difficult, and some impossible. Mostly difficult. Vitamin A is fat-soluble vitamin. Well, of course, that's found in animal foods, and precursors to vitamin A are found in vegetable foods. And you can take in so many more of the precursors, but if you take in too many of the animal foods, you can actually die. Yes, you can die from taking too much vitamin A. Let's look it up, shall we? Vitamin A toxicity, retinol toxicity. Just because. Vitamin A toxicity. Something that you're not likely to find in hypervitaminosis A causes symptoms and diagnosis, visual changes, bone pain and skin changes, retinol safety. Vitamin A toxicity is rare in the general population, can occur with high amounts of vitamin A are taken over short or long periods of time. So can you die from it? No, you can get sick from it. Let's see. What happens? Avoid taking vitamin A in high doses due to increased risk of toxicity and death. Vitamin A may cause bleeding in the lungs, blurry vision, bone pain, breathing difficulty, changes in the immune function, chronic inflammation of the liver, cirrhosis, scarring of the liver, cough, cracked fingernails, cracked lips, death. Okay, so what do they mean by vitamin A? They don't mean beta-carotene or any of the carotenoids. They mean retinol, the stuff that's made in animals. You don't need much. Nevertheless, if you're on an extremely deficient diet, eating white bread and sugar, and that's the food that came in, I forgot the white bread and also the tinned milk and the dried, probably dried milk, but mostly white bread, sugar, candy, this stuff wasn't even fortified. They fortified it after a lot of people got sick. They sprayed vitamins back into the shit food. And so if you've been eating even supposedly healthy shit cereal like Barbara's or, Granola Valley, whatever. I don't know what any of them are called anymore. I used to know. Kellogg's. If you eat any of that stuff, they're all sprayed with vitamins. And they're not great vitamins, but you're getting some vitamins, and your body will do something with it. Not enough, but something. So you don't become totally deficient. That's why people don't run around with rickets and scurvy, and everything's sprayed in. It's pretty easy to... By the way, it's pretty easy not to get scurvy. You could eat sweet tarts and not get scurvy. You just need some citric acid. So... Weston A. Price found that people did, blah, blah, blah. They did better. Okay. All right. Cool. What do you want me to know? So, he went around the world and found this. Now, he didn't look at populations that were agricultural that didn't eat sugar, because he just didn't. He just looked at outlier populations. Populations on very bad land. Populations that could generally not farm or not farm very much. Closest I think he got to a farming population, maybe I'm wrong, but it was the Swiss population that grew rye, so they ate rye bread. There was a Gaelic population, they lived on the coast, it was brutal, they could eat oats. Oats kept them alive, and so did fish. They ate a lot of fish and a lot of oats. Of course, they probably had all kinds of problems as they got older, but he didn't worry about that. He didn't do life expectancy. He didn't do any of that kind of stuff. He didn't care. He cared about teeth. If teeth were okay, then he was happy. If they weren't, then he wasn't. He looked at populations that resorted to cannibalism, and he was happy about their teeth. Okay, I get it. They had good teeth. They ate some fish. They had fat-soluble vitamins, and maybe that's the point. The Weston A. Price Foundation could dismantle itself, totally go away, stop telling people to eat offal and brains and kidneys and livers. If it said, look, we want people to farm in a way that's sustainable, which probably means goats, rabbits, ducks, birds, and not so many cows. We want you to be sustainable. That means farming fish and oysters and small things that you can do in buckets in your backyard, and a lot of vegetables and grains, heritage grains, legacy grains, rye, oats, quinoa, millet, buckwheat, ancient wheat, barley. We want you to grow all these things. Teff. And the other one, the thing they make that's teff. Make injera out of it. And grow beans. Every kind of bean is good. Just cook it. We'll get into it. Don't worry, I'll cover that. And you could eat some little animal livers now and then, because what you're really after, but they have to be little animals, and you can't kill animals every week unless you're talking about small things like frogs and snails and insects, because these things have to grow, and they take months to grow, and you can't just kill them once you have them, because they have to breed, and then the new brood has to get to a certain age before you can just kill the old one, especially if they're mammals and they breastfeed. So it's not a supermarket out there if you're raising animals. You can't just take everything off the shelves and expect a truck to bring it back, because after all, we are truckitarians. What we really hunt is the Truckosaurus, which runs on the ancient plant called gasoline. So Weston Price wasn't modern in many senses. He didn't really understand the petroleum state, which was just beginning to develop. He didn't really understand that looking at people who were eating a ton of sugar and saying they had bad teeth in a generation isn't the same thing as saying people who eat beans and grains and don't eat if people eat beans and grains and vegetables and a little bit of animal food are healthy, but that doesn't mean that eating very little grains and very little beans and a lot of animal food is healthy. It's a huge mistake. it's a mistake. It's a steak that was misplaced, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. The genius, fat-soluble vitamins. Probably something that many vegans have missed, including myself when I was more vegan-y. Probably missed those. So I would always go to restaurants here and there. I'm sure stuff went before the GMO era. I just figured I couldn't get everything in my diet, so I'd go to a Greek place and an Indian place and a Mexican places, and I figured stuff slipped in that I wasn't aware of, and maybe it was buffering my diet a little bit, or bolstering, I should say. But I stopped going to restaurants a while ago after the GMO period, and Chipotle's just frankly too clean to get anything out of. They used to put pork in their brown beans, and so I probably ate more pig than I really ever wanted to just by eating their brown beans. But they took it out. Probably too many complaints from vegans. I think that people should want to eat small bits of small animals. Animal food should be a condiment, eggs or the eggs of fish, roe, or even some fish itself or meat itself, small animals. Why aren't we growing ducks and chickens and quail and grouse and, what are those called? Guinea hens? No, that's not a slur. Jesus. I'm not insulting it. It's called a guinea fowl. Just get a grip. God, you racists. It is my birthday. Just don't forget that. Whatever you're thinking, just be nice. To me. To each other, I don't know. Whatever you want to do. So there's Weston A. Price in a nutshell. Now, the Sally Fallon Brigade, and these people, by and large, are kind of crazy, have decided that grain cannot be eaten unless it's soaked for 180 million years because it contains phytic acid. Well, turns out phytic acid has probably anti-cancer properties, breaks up gallstones, kidney stones, stuff you don't want, stuff you get from eating too much meat, and helps the nervous system in other ways. So phytic acid, which they call an anti-nutrient, the anti-nutrient, they're as bad as the science crowd. You're anti-science, you don't believe in anything. The Weston A. Price crowd and the paleo people, it's an anti-nutrient. No, it's actually you might as well think of it as a nutraceutical if you're going to call it anything. Because it breaks up stones, it seems to have anti-cancer properties. It's good for a number of things, actually. Let me get my page on... Urinate phytate and calcium oxalate, stone formers in healthy people, dietary effects on phytate excretion. It looks like phytate inhibits the crystallization of calcium salts and prevents kidney stone development. Yeah, that's what a terrible, terrible, terrible anti-nutrient to stop you from getting kidney stones. How about phytate, cancer inhibition by phytate, inositol, hexaphosphate, IP6, and inositol from laboratory to clinic. So here's a paper talking about cancer suppression and a variety of cancers. Let's keep going here. What else do we have on phytate? Plenty. Phytates and phytic acid from Precision Nutrition. Phytic acid higher in nuts and seeds than grains. Benefits. Let's look. Protective against cardiovascular disease, cancer, and diabetes. Grains with no phytic acid are the refined ones. So we can see that people not eating refined grains don't get the phytic acid. When phytic acid minerals bind in the gut, it prevents the formation of free radicals, making it an antioxidant. Seems to bind with heavy metals, cadmium, and lead. Wow, what a terrible, 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 terrible thing. Insulin. Phytic acid plays a role in pancreatic function and insulin secretion. It may reduce glycemic response from meals, meaning you feel full for longer. Hemochromatosis or iron overload is a common genetic disorder that phytic acid's iron-binding properties can... Hey, people who eat a ton of meat and are getting too much iron, maybe you should be eating grains, you fucking jackasses over in the paleo camp. Yes, maybe you should be eating some grains, you fucking morons. I'm so bored from reading your web pages about anti-nutrients. I'm so tired of it. Even Mark Sisson at Mark's Daily Apple says, who's just one of the crazies of paleo, paleo world, says, yeah, okay, phytic acid may help you not get certain problems. Now, if you're really worried about phytic acid, and if you're offended that I called paleo people names, just relax. Go online and look up paleo people and then look up diarrhea. I can't take people seriously who tell you that getting used to paleo means you have to go through a period of extreme exhaustion and pain. Fuck off. Honestly, grow up. I'm not saying for people who have allergies to grains to eat grains. I'm saying that for people who are on this self-cannibalizing diet called the paleo diet, and that's what it is. It's self-cannibalizing. You put yourself into ketosis all the time so you don't have to exercise or so you don't have to mind your meals or so you don't have to eat any fiber and grain so that your body can suffer while it tries to digest protein, which it as sugar, which it can't do without secreting so much acid into your blood that you suck the minerals out of your bones. It's not a balanced diet. Why don't you eat more beans and some grains and not worry so much about what Mark Sisson or these other jackasses say about what they think about you were as a caveman, please. They don't know anything. Come on. There's a reason why people tamed grains and beans and all these things tens and tens of thousands of years ago. And if you're worried about it, by the way, all you got to do, if you want to, you could soak your beans overnight or not. You could just eat them with some lemon. I know, how crazy. Vitamin C appears strong enough to overcome phytic acid. What's that? The terrible, deadly anti-nutrient is overcome by a little vitamin C? Yeah, maybe that's why people around the world have tended to eat grains with a little bit of lemon or vinegar. Like, I know it's not vitamin C, but it's an acid, like vinegar, which will break up the phytic acid. Wow. 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 In one study, 50 milligrams, not grams, milligrams, 50, what is that, thousandths of a gram, oh my God, 50 one-thousandths of a gram of vitamin C, which is, let's see, there are 5,000 milligrams in a teaspoon, so 1/100th of a teaspoon of vitamin C counteracted the phytic acid load of a meal. Oh, stop the presses. I haven't set this up well enough. If you go online and look up phytic acid, the anti-nutrient is destroying your life. Shut up. Shut up. Eat some vitamin C. Fucking jackasses. Nobody wants to do the two-lane research. You know, if you point your fingers, there are three fingers pointing back at you. So point your finger and say phytic acid binds with iron. It does. Say that it binds with calcium. Very bloody weakly. Say that it binds with zinc. Weakly but better than calcium. Now say you'll not get some iron. Thank God. You know how easy it is to have too much iron in your blood and how sick you can get? Especially if you're a big meat eater. It binds with a little calcium, zinc, and iron. Okay, binds with iron best. How do you stop it from doing that? Oh, eat some vitamin C. What's vitamin C, you say? Anything. Anything in a green pepper, lemon, tomato. I think tomatoes have some. Any kind of citrus. Broccoli, parsley, greens. Yeah, that's right. Throw some cherry tomatoes and broccoli and parsley into a salad with a tiny bit of little apple cider vinegar, and your phytic acid worries are over for the day. Now, you may have grain allergies, but don't tell me that you're sure that it's phytic acid, because I guarantee if you're on one of these ridiculous paleo destroy your kidney diets, you're eating plenty of nuts and seeds. Guess what they have? Up the a-hole. Phytic acid. Good, because it's cancer protective, and you need it. There's no diet that's going to protect you from having problems. Everybody's going to have problems. Life is trouble. Life is a problem. Just ask Kazantzakis. Ask Zorba. Get up in the morning, life is trouble. There's always trouble. If you think that you can avoid the terrible problems of phytic acid by just eating meat, how many carcinogens are you eating? How many carcinogens are in meat? Go ahead. Start to label them. Now, if you want to get on the Weston A price bandwagon and start telling me that you're avoiding dangerous estrogens from soy, oh my God, these people are mentally fucking ill. Mentally ill. The Sally Fallon group has decided that phytoestrogens, very weakly binding, non-alpha binding plant, but very weakly binding plant estrogens are the same as mammalian estrogens. Guess where there are mammalian estrogens? In mammals. Guess what the Paleo and Sally Fallon people eat? Mammal. They eat a lot of mammal. They eat a lot of mammary fluid over there in the Sally Fallon camp. So what are you talking about? In fact, the fact that soy phytoestrogens tend to bind where mammalian estrogens go blocks the mammalian estrogens from binding, thus stopping, perhaps preventing many kinds of cancers. In fact, if you look at longitudinal studies, that's long-term studies in populations that eat a lot of soy and no milk, guess what they don't have? The soft tissue cancers that we Western milk drinkers have. Oh, no. You want to drink some milk? Drink some milk. You want to eat some yogurt? It's not going to kill you, and I doubt you're going to get cancer from eating some organic, non-GMO, pasture, whatever, goat or cow yogurt. I really, sincerely fucking doubt it. I doubt that you're going to get cancer eating an egg a month or 2 eggs a month. Or a week, maybe. Maybe that's a lot, I don't know. But I doubt that you're going to get any kind of terrible disease if you eat a lot of broccoli and lentils and beans, if you eat an egg once in a while. What if you eat a little bit of little bird or other kind of animal once in a while? I really doubt you're going to get some terrible bloody disease by eating a little bit of animal food. What if you eat a chicken liver once in a while? Why would you? Vitamin A, vitamin D, fat-soluble vitamins, those things that Weston A. Price found were good for people's teeth. I doubt you're going to have any big problems. What if you eat a little fish liver once in a while? Doubt you're going to have any problems. What if you decide that it's impossible for you to eat anything but fish liver, cow liver, and chicken liver? I think you're going to have some problems. Is that fair enough? My name is Liam Scheff. This is the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV, Truth Frequency Radio. This is American Heretic. It's the Liam Scheff Show. Support independent science, journalism, ranting, raving, and other kinds of lunacy by putting a couple dollars into the PayPal. Yeah, it's my birthday. Come on. Or just by buying a book. Book's cheap, but it's worth it. It's cheap, it's inexpensive, but it's worth it. Change your life. Maybe. Change your mind? Probably. What were we talking about? Weston. It's written in the style of, early 1900s. It's kind of folksy. He's no dummy. He was a good dentist. He took radioactive x-rays of people's faces to see how cavity formation and healing was going. And he was all right. I mean, he was okay. He was an okay guy, I think. But that he didn't stay long enough to worry about infanticide rates or infant mortality rates, that he didn't worry about overall death rate or life expectancy, means that his research isn't worth very fucking much. And we have to think about it very carefully. It means that some of it's worthwhile. And what he seemed to find was that something in fat-soluble and animal fats was very protective and helped build calcium and heal calcium structures in the body. Well, that's meaningful. It's not the only thing in the world, but it's meaningful. It has nothing to do with cancer, nothing to do with heart disease. Let's look at the Maasai tribe. He was, the Maasai tribe, I think, had great teeth. And they eat mostly milk and blood. They don't eat a lot of meat because you can't kill a lot of animals when you don't have a lot of animals. You can kill some once in a while and then you share it with everybody and you eat every part of it. I imagine they have parasites like everybody else who eats raw meat and blood. We'll get to the Eskimos in the second half hour. So, they have their problems. They also die in their, what we would consider middle age. By and large, the majority die somewhere in their 40s. Well, that's terrible. They also have arterial scarring and problems from eating so many saturated fats. They also eat half the calories that we do. I mean, they live on a starvation diet. Hence, they're so skinny. It's not that they just have great genetics, because if you put them on an American diet, I guarantee those great genetics would backfire and they'd be fat as can be in no time. They're very, very tall. Now, why might they be very tall? Because they eat so much mammalian, what was that again? Hormones, right. Estrogenic hormones, large growth-oriented hormones. The Maasai, in fact, seem to limit the consumption of milk during what? During what? Pregnancy, so the baby isn't so big that it can't be born. They seem to recognize something about milk, that it makes growth happen. What would that say to you about cancer? Oh, yeah. Oh, never mind. We don't need to think about that. We're Sally Fallon Incorporated. If you're sick, just drink more milk. And if you think I sound a little bitter about this, I was at the Weston A. Price, the former Weston A. Price headquarters in Fort Lauderdale, where I used to have some friends. I don't know if I do anymore, but I hope they're bigger people than just being cultish. And one of the local, guys working there was telling somebody coming in shopping for raw milk that she should be drinking more raw milk. Well, the problem was that she or I can't remember if it was her or a friend, had a tumor that was growing, and it still seemed to be growing even though she was following advice and drinking more raw milk. And he said, well, that's just the initial stage. You just drink more raw milk and then paradoxically it'll get big, but then it will get small. And I was there actually with my friend Robert Scott Bell, and we looked at each other and went, just what the fuck are you talking about? What person on earth says drink an estrogenic, muscle-building, fat-building, bone-building thing when you have a tumor? Who does that? Nobody's sane. So this is the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV and Truth Frequency Radio. You can support this message of independent, free-thinking, what's the word? Come as you are? No. What is it when you just free associate? No. Stream of consciousness? Thank you. Journalism by putting a couple dollars into PayPal, buying my book, Official Stories. Talking about Sally Fallon Brigade, the takeover of Weston A. Price's good name by people who just tell you to eat as much horse, a-hole, and every other, offal and liver and kidney and brain as you can possibly get your teeth around. Instead of saying some animal foods that we may find questionable in large doses, in small doses have important fat-soluble vitamins that will make your health much better. Now, isn't that... You want me to say it again? Some animal foods, taken in small doses, which may seem a little repellent to us, may have important bone-building, health-supportive qualities. Okay. All right, sold. You're saying as a condiment, I might have the littlest bit of liver pate of chicken or fish here and there. I might eat some fish liver pressings, what do you call those, extracts, whatever you call those, pressed, I don't know. I might eat a little of this now and then, no big deal. I might eat some fish eggs now and then, no big deal. Why? It's a condiment. It's not the center of the meal. I'm not going to be building large toxic accumulations of metal, of mercury, of pesticides, or simply of mammalian estrogens and testosterone analogs and not analogs of what are those called, hormones. Instead of having to eat large volumes of animal hormones, I can stay low in the animal hormone business while getting some of the benefits of the fat-soluble vitamins. Now, wouldn't that make more sense than telling people to sneak brains into their children's food, into their scrambled eggs and hash, no matter what they say? When Atkins dropped dead of a heart attack, I said maybe people will get it that eating this yang, in the Asian sense of the word, eating this kind of tightening food is not really good for us. It's not actually good for us. It breeds excess. Just as being a Fruity Pebbles vegan for a decade or a few years, no matter how many vitamins are sprayed on your food, breeds deficiency. And you will start to see signs of deficiency in your health, in your strength, in your ability to heal. So you recognize that I am, I practice this thing that I will call macrobiotic-ish. I lean east in my philosophy. There are no natural vegan tribes on the planet. There are also no completely meat-eating tribes on the planet. They wouldn't exist. And the Maasai do eat grains and beans, and they get as many vegetables as they can get. So don't tell me that they're a full meat-eating tribe. In fact, mostly what they eat is milk, and they die in their 40s. People on paleo blogs will actually sit around arguing how you can't tell whether the Maasai diet that's so high in blood and milk is good or bad for you because they die too young for diseases to develop. How fucking... what? Oh my God. Actually we would have figured it out, but we couldn't figure out how healthy they were because they died. But we're sure that they would have been healthy had they not died, but they died. All right. Okay. Again, if you're on the paleo side of things, if you're so allergic to grain that you can't eat any of it, I understand. I understand to some degree. I can't eat bread. I can't eat bread. It does something in my head. It just fucks me up in special ways. Yeasted bread fucks me up in special ways. It makes me extremely moody and depressed. I don't like it. I don't do well with it. I don't eat it. Not a big deal. I don't eat non-gluten bread. I just don't eat bread. I don't fucking care, and I don't miss it. I like noodles. I can eat wheat noodles. I can eat spelt noodles. I can eat buckwheat noodles. I can eat rice noodles, corn noodles, and quinoa noodles. I can eat any kind of noodle. And hey, I don't know what you're... Just relax. Just put that dirty, dirty mind of yours away. I can eat any kind of noodle in the world. Sorry. Made me laugh. Anyway, I can eat noodles. They're easy to digest. And if you're worried about a little phytate, oh, boo. You know what? Eat it with some lemon. Eat it with some apple cider vinegar, olive oil, flaxseed oil, hemp oil. Eat it with some ghee if you really are that desperate for some saturated fats. Eat it with some soaked almond cream. Eat it with some cashews that you've blended. Eat it with cashews and nutritional yeast. Eat it with natto. Eat it with fermented soy. Eat it with non-fermented soy. Okay, let's talk about soy. So the Sally Fallon Foundation, which goes under the incorrect name of the Weston A. Price Foundation, which had very little to do, frankly, with Weston A. Price, who noticed that some fat-soluble vitamins were good, but animal foods, but people who lived in people who lived in farmable land tended to eat more plant foods than animal foods. Why? Because naturally animal foods are hard to get. Big animals are hard to procure. You use them for milk and for tractors. You don't cut them into pieces every 5 days. You keep them for years at a time, milking them, driving them, occasionally sacrificing one for a feast day in which you feed everybody, preserve everything, boil everything. Every culture in the world, whether if it found an animal carcass, I imagine that it would steal as much as it could from it, and then it would boil as much as it could. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's a way to get a lot of minerals out of something. You boil it for 8 hours, you get the minerals out. No big surprise there either. Japanese do it with fish because they didn't have many other animals, so they did it with fish. And the dashi, fish stock made of bonito. The traditional stock is made of cooked fish bones and fish heads. Very good for you. Notice it's a fish stock. Notice you're not eating like 2 pounds of fish apiece. You're eating the watery remains in hot liquid that have been pulled out through long-term cooking and application of yang fire energy with salt and kombu. Highly mineral rich, something we should all be having, except we can't eat fish anymore because the entire ocean on the Pacific side seems to be pretty polluted. The Atlantic is a little better, but it's all overfished. So it's very difficult for us to do that. It's very, very, very difficult for us to have any clean food. So we should probably be getting into something called aquaponics. We should be growing hemp because hemp is quite nearly a perfect food, although there are no perfect foods. And if you over-rely on hemp, I'm sure that some of the lectins or other problems in the bean will get to you, in the seed will get to you. So, whatever. Another nearly perfect food is soy. Oh, I'm sorry. Soy causes AIDS, cancer, diabetes, and leprosy, and bad breath, and stinky butt syndrome, according to Sally Fallon, who's not getting much thinner on her animal food diet, by the way. That's her promise. Get thin, eat fat, get thin. Isn't it? Let's look it up. Let's look it up. Sally Fallon, eat fat, stay fat. How about that? Sally Fallon, eat fat, stay fat. Sally Fallon, eat fat, get thin. Make sure I'm just getting the title right. Eat fat, lose fat. The healthy alternative to trans fats. Marbled beef. Okay. You want to eat some fats and lose some fats? How about this? What about hemp seed oil, flaxseed oil, olive oil? What about sesame oil? There's an oil with many health-giving properties. What about, okay, you want some animal foods, eat a little ghee. You want a little butter? You're not going to lose fat on butter. Why? It's mammalian estrogenic liquid. It's going to help you build. There's nothing wrong with building a little bit. We need to build our bones. It's going to have that vitamin A in it. Does it have vitamin K? Ooh, there's a good question. We need our vitamin K. And that's what Weston Price was looking for. He was looking for the mystery ingredient that seemed to help people. So let's look up butter, vitamin K. I don't know if it's in butter. Mystery of X, butter, oil, and vitamin K. So maybe ghee. Yeah, so grass-fed. Okay, vitamin K too. So you have to eat grass-fed butter. So there you go. So eat a little grass-fed butter, get some vitamin K. Nothing bad. You're not going to have some... All right, vegans, you're not going to have the worst day of your life. I don't really like the taste of dairy, but it's going to be okay. You can also eat natto. You can eat natto. You can get organic soybeans. They still exist. Don't worry, they still exist. And you can go to the store and buy a container of natto. Boil the soybeans until they're all the way cooked. You got to take those little pesky outer shells off during the cooking. Clean them off. Soak them, brush them, clean them, cook them. They're nice and sweet. Eat a couple, and then take in the store-bought thing of natto and spread it around. Put it in a warm place, like one of those fermenters or a dehydrator or the inside of an oven set to 80 or 90 degrees. Look it up online. Don't do it just for me talking. And in a day, 24 hours, you'll have natto. 2 days, you'll have natto. Probably one. Natto, fermented soy, nice and sticky, full of vitamin K. Highest source of vitamin K. Fat-soluble vitamin from a vegetarian source. Well, not really, because you're eating bacteria. Are bacteria vegetables? I don't know. I don't worry about that too much. I worry about low on the food chain. Really, low on the food chain. Why? Less toxic accumulation. More likely to feed more people. Now, the Sally Fallon Brigade wants you all to eat horse anus. Or if not horse anus, cow liver. They all want you to be able to eat the biggest animals and the biggest cuts of the biggest animals, etc., etc. Now, if you poke around, they'll say that they only recommend a certain amount of daily calories from protein. But then if you go look at her webpage recipes, there are 37 recipes or 40 recipes, something like that, on the webpage, Weston Price Foundation webpage, that are for meat and milk. Meat and milk. Meat, milk, fish. Mostly animal. Mostly cow, pig, and then milk. There are 5 grain recipes. No, there are 4 grain recipes and 1 bean recipe. So, are we done yet? Yeah. If I've been to Weston A. Price things, everything is meat and milk. Everything is meat and milk. And if there's a cookie, it's mostly a lard cookie. It's a lard cookie made with butter. And the chocolate chips are actually hardened bits of calf liver, which I soak in maple syrup. Okay. All right, I'm going to dial the 9 and the 1, and you tell me when I should dial the other. Just pass out, and I will dial the other. And we will try to find a new heart for you, because I understand. No problem. So, instead of thinking about what's sustainable, the Weston A. Price Foundation wants you to be afraid of soy. And they'll tell you that soy is the same thing soy is the same thing for the Weston A. Price Foundation as birth control pills. That should be amusing to everybody, because soybeans don't contain any mammalian estrogens. They don't contain synthetic mammalian estrogens. They contain weakly binding plant analogs that other plants contain too. The reason that soy may be so cancer protective is because those weakly binding estrogens interfere with the binding of mammalian estrogens. Maybe that's the reason the Japanese have traditionally had such low incidence of every kind of fucking cancer that we get in the milk-eating countries of the world. Maybe. Now, if you decide to eat a little bit of milk, you're going to be probably really healthy and fine. Really fine. I remember when I first heard about Weston A. Price and I knew it was a cult, this lady was telling me about it, and she's very susceptible to believing things and jumping down the rabbit hole and going all the way. And she was drinking a pint or a quart. No, she was drinking a quart of raw milk every day. And I said, you are going to get kidney stones, and you're going to be intensely mucus-filled, and you'll probably get sick. Liam, you don't understand. My body needs it. I thought, listen, you selfish fucking follower. If you lived on a farm, if you lived in a town that farmed, and among the town you had 30 or 40 cows that everybody took care of, and you had to use the milk that you got to feed everybody in the town, you're not going to drink a quart of milk a day. You're going to have a quarter of a glass of milk a day. Most of it's going to go to make butter and cheeses that can survive that survive the cold weather. Because if you live in an area where there are cows, there's probably cold weather. If you're in an area where people milk cows for regular food, it's because the farming there sucks asshole. If you're in an area where you have to milk big animals to get food, it's because the farming there sucks shit for half of the year. And you need to put aside a large store of food that can survive cold weather. So you take the milk and you churn it into butter, and it's shelf stable in a cool space for a long, long, long time. Same with butter. In fact, butter is built on the principle that the more rotten it is, the better it is. I mean, cheese, sorry. Eggs, not so much. Eggs you have to use pretty quickly, so you keep chickens around. Plants are seasonal. If you live in an area where you grow a lot, you eat a lot of plants. You eat far more plants, you get fat from plants, and you eat some animals. You truly eat some animals. Nobody's a vegan. No tribes are vegans. None. And they all eat animals because people like the taste of meat. Meat has I want to say acrylamides, but I'm sorry if I think that's right. Meat has elements in it that smell good and taste good when they're cooked in a way that nobody can deny that they excite the olfactory senses. And so you have to say this is pretty built in. Chimpanzees, animals, mostly vegetarian animals, also like the smell of cooking meat. I don't know what that's about, but they go and they eat it. It's not that it's really good for them because it contains all kinds of carcinogenic molecules. So who knows? I don't know. Tell me it's good for you, and I'll point you to 1,000 studies that say, actually, it seems to be problematic. You want to eat some of it, eat some of it. I'm not here to police you. Don't worry about it. Eat what you want. But think about what's sustainable. The Sally Fallon group wants you to eat as high on the hog, as high on the land as you can. They put out these ridiculous, policy papers about how it's silly that we should worry about land and water use with cattle, because there's one small organic farm that seems to be doing okay in feeding its tiny boutique market of shoppers that can afford that kind of price for that kind of product of carcass. Give me a break. I mean, we all know. Just go look at the Roman Empire. The slaves cut the rabbits for the masters and went home and ate rye. They ate rye, porridge, and they ate little animals that they could get, mostly fish because they're so abundant. Not even fish. Mussels and clams, things you can pick off the seashore. But now that our seashores are so polluted, you wouldn't want to eat a mussel and a clam because it's full of mercury and lead and any other fucking thing that goes into the ocean, that we dump into the ocean. We're a disaster. The best food you're going to get these days is by growing a little bit of yourself and sharing with other people who grow it themselves. You're going to have a couple of buckets or dig some ponds in your backyard and fill it with fresh or saltwater versions of fish and crustaceans. And you're going to eat some of those. Not a ton, but some. Some. And if vegans don't like it, you're getting fat-soluble vitamins and important amino acids from it. And I know you don't need amino acids. I'm not protein deficient in the least, and I mean, I haven't eaten enough animal food to really count in terms of protein. And I've never really lost significant muscle mass. If I wanted to gain more muscle mass, I would just eat more food with protein and work out a little bit more. That's the way I'm built. Some people aren't so lucky, I guess. I don't know. The Sally Fallon group, though, wants you to hate soy. They want you to hate soy because they say that soy estrogens and soy hormones are the same as animal hormones, when in fact they're protective against the absorption of animal hormones. So it's the exact opposite. Neither are they endocrine disruptors, and there's nobody who can tell you anything. There's just no serious study. Nobody will tell you that they're endocrine disruptors, and any long-term studies don't show any kind of thyroid problems from eating soy. On the other hand, if you eat a lot of milk, you can probably become anemic, right? Right? Because aren't there things in milk that block the uptake of iron? Let's look. Maybe I got that backwards. Let me look. No, let me look. You can correct me. Let me look. Milk, anemia. I guess I'm correct. In infants, the introduction of cow's milk in the first year of life is the greatest dietary risk factor for the development of iron deficiency and iron deficiency anemia. Cow's milk is low in iron, and iron is poorly absorbed. Does drinking milk inhibit iron absorption? NCBI.NLM.NaH, anemia caused by low iron children. Anemia caused by low iron level is the most common form of anemia. Toddlers who drink cow's milk will also become anemic. Iron deficiency anemia over and over and over again. So I guess they don't worry about that. They worry about phytate, which is anti-cancer, but they don't worry about cow's milk, which is okay, whatever. Do you understand what I'm talking about? The incredible hypocrisy. Now talk about the fact that a pound of milk takes thousands of gallons of water. A pound of beef takes thousands of gallons of water to produce. Thousands of gallons. A pound. And you can get many, 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 many dozens to hundreds of pounds of grains, beans, and vegetables for the same volume of water. Why aren't we being serious? Then the vegans come out and say you have to be vegan to be ethical. You don't have to be vegan to be ethical. Just eat low in the food chain. Very low in the food chain, and accept that life is imperfect and we're going to eat a little bit of animal food here and there. All vegans eat insects, by the way. They just don't think they do. Unless you are... No, you're anybody who... Insects die for your food. There's nothing you can do about it. And we all have to eat bacteria. And maybe you're talking about large mammals. I get it. What if you decided you didn't have to eat any large mammals at all? Could you live well? Absolutely. You could eat mussels and shells and oysters and that sort of thing. You could eat the occasional crustacean. Even if you didn't want to, you could. You could eat... you could drink the milk of very small animals. You could eat the occasional little bird. Little bird. Or you could let other people eat it and just drink some of the minerals from the bones. Or you could eat little fish. Japanese eat a lot of little fish. Go to the store, and instead of a bulk section containing oats, they have a bulk section containing pounds and pounds and pounds of tiny little silver fish. Eyes, heads, everything. Just dry. You know, the people eat them like salty snacks. You think that's bad for you? It's not. It's not bad for you. Maybe the Fukushima fish are bad for you. But, you know, the ancient way of eating little dried fish is not bad for you. They're hardly big. They've hardly had a life. You know, they're pulled out and dried. And you don't have to like it, but you're getting a lot of good stuff from it. Now, in terms of being healthy to eat more... Well, I didn't finish the soy thing. So the Sally Fallon Brigade says that eating infant formula filled with soy is the same as giving children toxic equivalent of many birth control pills. It's, of course, not true. Besides misunderstanding the different kinds of estrogen, the different kinds of estrogen receptors, and the different kinds of phytoestrogen, and the very different... And the huge differences between a plant estrogen analog and an actual mammalian estrogen. They misunderstand the volume, they misunderstand the amount, they misunderstand the absorbability, and they totally disregard the fact that soy looks to be cancer protective, heart disease protective, atherosclerosis protective, that actually tends to reverse these problems, heart disease and hardening of arteries and other things. Helpful for the liver. And that high volume of phytates that everybody's worried about may be one of the reasons why it's so good at all these things. The other thing of blocking mammalian estrogens may be the other reason. So I'm so tired of it I could puke. I'm so tired of these arguments. Now, I know that the American soy industry is corrupt as any, and they come along and they wash soy with hexane, and don't eat that. Don't eat TVP. You know, it's not really good for you. On the other hand, you can look up studies where animals were given TVP, and it still helped them. It still lowered some of their fatty problems or their heart problems, or seem to have some protective qualities. I'm not going to recommend it. I'm going to not recommend TVP. I'm going to just say whole soy things, from edamame to tofu to natto to miso. I'm going to recommend even a little soy milk. They drink soy milk in Asia. I mean, soy milk is what you get after you boil a soybean. You think people didn't eat it? You think people in the soybean making business, the tofu making business, didn't just siphon off some of that delicious, fatty, creamy stuff that was, relatively full of nutrients, had high fat-soluble vitamins, and a lot of protein? In a world where it's sometimes difficult to get clean, good sources of protein, you think they didn't eat that? They eat it all over Asia. The idea that they only eat fermented soy is a little bit ridiculous, because most tofu isn't fermented. Some tofu is fermented. Some is fresh tofu. Like some milk is fresh milk and some milk is cheese. It's the same fucking thing. In Asia, some tofu is fresh tofu and some is fermented tofu and some is natto and some is tempeh. It depends on where you are. And some is the skin from the tofu making process, where they boil the soy milk and they take off the really fatty protein layer on top and they dry it. And then it forms sort of a yellow skin that you put into your soup, and it's like eggs. It's like egg whites. They use it for everything. And you really think that that's the problem? In countries where they have no real history of cancer or heart disease? Go to Okinawa, where they eat more pork than anywhere, but they eat more tofu than anywhere. And you think that soy is the problem? Go to places like Germany, where they don't eat tofu, but they eat pork, and they have the highest rates of heart disease, high rates of cancer, bowel cancer. Nobody wants to be serious about this food discussion. Everybody wants to win. Nobody wants to say, that there's a baseline. And the baseline is we digest carbohydrates. That's really what we eat. We eat carbohydrates. People may not like that, but that's what our bodies are designed to do. By Vishnu the Almighty, by Krishna, Shiva, Brahma the Almighties, by the Tao, by whatever you believe in. We are designed in our guts, we are built. We are engineered. Our engineering is to digest carbohydrates. That's what our engineering does. That's what it does. That's it. For energy. What we use to build, we use proteins. We use some fats to build cells, and then we use fats to store energy. If we have to convert proteins into energy, it takes a fuck shitload of extra energy, and it produces poison. If we have to, the same with fat. It's hard to do. We get better at it as we are doing it for longer. So, the more you're essentially burning fat every day, the better you'll be at burning fat. Still, in order to use the fat, it has to be converted back to a carbohydrate, back to a sugar. So what do you think the body wants? Not white sugar. That's an abomination. It's an aberration of the actual long chain, complex carbohydrates. You get the idea. Don't get sucked into any particular fad. If you're worried about anti-nutrients, remember that the anti-nutrients are actually nutraceuticals. The lectins and the phytates protect you from cancer, heart disease, atherosclerosis, kidney stones. Just remember that. Just remember that. And if you want to deal with some of them, guess what helps? Cooking, sprouting, lemon juice, vinegar. Too hard to remember? Okay, I'm sorry. If it's too hard to remember, I think that you're looking for another show. But if you can remember it, this is Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV and Truth Frequency Radio. Please don't be terrified of food. We're all going to have problems. Everybody has degenerative problems. There's no perfect diet. You can't be an ascetic all your life, and you can't be a glutton all your life and not pay for it. You're going to have to just be somewhere in the range of what we call human. It's hard. I know. It's hard. I know. We all want to be perfect or imperfectly perfect or whatever. And if we want to eat hamburgers, we want to be told that they're perfectly healthy for us. And if we want to eat no hamburgers, we want to be told that we shouldn't have to eat any animal foods at all. But maybe the truth isn't quite in the middle. Maybe it's on the side of grains, beans, vegetables, and other healthy things with some supplementary animal foods. What if it's that? Is that the worst thing in the world? Is it? Well, I'll let you tell me. Yes, it's the Liam Scheff Show. It's American Heretic. Here I am bucking all the trends. And if you're looking to see who lives longer, I imagine vegetarians live longer than carnivores in the human family. I imagine that healthy vegetarians live as long or longer than vegans. I imagine that strict, lifelong vegans, especially raw food vegans, get very, very deficient and get sick, and they give up. I knew a couple long-term raw food vegans. I think raw foodism is fucking crazy. I think it's crazy. I think it's as crazy as carnivorism and paleo shit. The body has no ability to digest a lot of the stuff that we put into it, whether it's animal or vegetable. Cooking is helpful. Roasting some nuts, eating some raw, soaking some is helpful. My sin, I've eaten probably too many raw nuts. Probably created some my digestion's fine. I probably created some minor deficiencies, which hopefully I've bucked up by taking other things. But we'll see. We'll see as I get older. I'll do my best. I'll do my best to supplement with other things. I'm going to try to eat low on the food train. I'm going to try. I'm going to try really hard. Nobody needs to eat big pieces of red meat. If you want to not be anemic, you could eat a little bit of a chicken liver, or you could eat some what else has a lot of iron? Parsley, spinach, kale. You could juice those. You could eat a little bit of animal liver. You could eat some raw fish and some cooked fish. And I think that you'll start to push up your iron levels. If you're having so much trouble absorbing iron and you're that anemic, you're going to have to look at other mineral imbalances and some fat-soluble vitamins. If you have, like some of my friends who have kids who've been vaccine damaged and they have no ability to eat grain without having terrible, terrible problems, nobody can tell you exactly what's wrong, and you're going to have to juggle everything. I imagine that gelatin is helpful because it seems to help soothe the gut lining. I don't know if it totally repairs it, but something I've been reading. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Gelatins. You can get gelatin from fish, by the way. You don't have to eat beef or pork gelatin. Seems to help soothe the gut lining. You certainly absorb a lot of amino acids, and you get some extra glycine, which can be good for, well, calming the fuck down. You know, can be good for soothing the nervous system, which is never a bad thing. Many, many ways to go. You can eat the occasional egg yolk. I don't think that's particularly high in iron, but it has fat-soluble vitamin A. You can eat a little ghee or raw, what was I saying again? Grass-fed, what they call pasture-raised butter. You can eat goat milk. You can eat a little bit of really dense yogurt. Really dense yogurt. I don't mean any of the commercial brands. I mean the stuff you pay, $2 a little container for. All right, let's come back into the second hour. We're going to be playing some of the American Heretic video series over the next hour of the show. Some of the greatest hits of the last week. See if you like what I've been up to with my video series. Remember, if you like what I'm doing, it isn't free. I got my own issues, things to pay for, the teeth that I've ground into bits, so I have to get some fillings. Sure, you can feel sorry for me, or you don't have to feel sorry for me. I have a little mouth guard now. That's helping a lot. Should have had it years ago. Years ago. Oh, I'm so stupid, but I refused because I didn't like the way it felt. Now I couldn't sleep without it because it stops me from biting my own bloody fucking teeth. This is the Liam Scheff Show. Please do support independent journalism. The messages that I'm giving you are, frankly, more considered. Even if I'm cursing a lot and you don't like that, they're more considered, more thoughtful, and more balanced than what you will get on the paleo blogosphere or most of the vegan blogosphere. Although I will hand it to some of the vegan bloggers, they're a lot more reasonable than a lot of the paleo bloggers. Not all of them. Not the you're a bad person if you eat any meat, but the sympathetic ones. Even John Robbins of EarthSave, a guy who I like, by the way, speaks nicely about everybody, except Sally Fallon. But he speaks well of Weston A. Price, and he doesn't put down people for eating animal foods. So maybe that's a difference between the Sally Fallon version of the Weston Price idea and the actual Weston Price idea. And maybe that's why I'm sick of them. Okay, let's get into the top videos of the week. Thank you very much for your support. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Here we come right now. Here it comes. Science doesn't work the way that people think it does. It's not a bunch of really great guys trying to find big truths about the universe and present them to all of us, who are out there busily working so that they have the funding to go do it and save all of our lives. It's not that at all. It's much more like it's religious, but it's kind of like a mafia too. It works like this. There's always an idea at the top. There's a capo. There's always a head of all of the sciences. And I don't just mean a person, I mean an idea. So if you decide that you want to work on cancer, you have to work on the idea that cancer isn't caused by any environmental disease. No, it's not no environmental toxin. Cancer is caused by mysterious things that go on in the body that we're not sure about, but we definitely know we have to poison the body and the cancer cells with mostly radioactive stuff and a lot of other chemicals to heal you from cancer. That's the going concern. If you have any other ideas, you're not really allowed in. HIV, going concern. HIV causes AIDS. Now, there are problems with that, like HIV tests suck and AIDS drugs kill people, but you're not allowed to talk about that. So you have to talk about why somebody mysteriously might die after taking AIDS drugs, even though they weren't sick before they started taking AIDS drugs. Maybe HIV got angry that you were trying to... more funding is needed for this mysterious problem that we don't understand. If you think I'm kidding, go and look into the field for a while. Vaccines. Well, we know that vaccines stop illness because that's what's on the label. That's what's at the top of, that's the capo. That's the head of this field. It's like you have a container and you can only get certain things in the container. So that the head says up here, vaccines save lives. Vaccines prevent illness. So the only research you can do in vaccinology is to say vaccines save lives. Vaccines prevent illness. Over here you have astronomy, Big Bang. We know there was a Big Bang, and first there was nothing which exploded. We have a lot of problems. I can't prove it. Actually, it's been contradicted now for so long we don't want to count. But if we're going into astronomy, this is the God that we worship. Now, isn't that a problem? I mean, brave, brave, brave science, right? I mean, if science were very brave and courageous instead of being cowardly and, frankly, small-minded, you'd think that science would say, shit, we're open to all kinds of ideas. I mean, what would happen if the vaccine industry, Columbia Presbyterian and Merck and a couple other companies took out a full-page ad in the New York Times and says, as hard as we're working on vaccines, in helping people with our vaccines, we know we're not perfect. We know there could be other ideas. So we're perfectly willing to let any number of journals be totally free of our brand of peer review, and they don't have to agree with us even on the model of vaccination or of immunology, because really what we're interested in is human health and well-being. Do you think that there wouldn't be a rush of people going, shit, I got plenty of ideas about human health and well-being. We those of us in the anti-vaccine or whatever movement know these people. We're like, yeah, we've seen this for years and years and years, and decades of literature and research and people saying we got plenty of ideas. So why don't they do it? It's not that there'd be no ideas coming forward, no people coming forward. Do you think in the HIV field, let's say that Abbott Labs and any of the other criminal organizations that run that, and Anthony Fauci and the rest of them come forward and they say, as hard as we've been working on understanding AIDS and HIV, we're not the only guys who have good ideas, and we know that there may be other ideas about how to deal with what this thing that we're calling AIDS, and they don't even have to agree with us. So what we'd like to do, before they finish the sentence, everybody's going to run and go, yeah, AZT kills people, so stop it. But what if it didn't have to be that contentious? What if there could be one journal on one side, or one set of journals, or one set of science that was called establishment science, and you just let it do what it wanted to do? It could get the funding that it could. We're establishment science. We believe in all these stories that we've made up. First, there was nothing which exploded, and a sex virus that we can't test for kills you in 100 years if you're black enough and gay enough and doing enough poppers and putting benzene up your ass. So if you do all of these things, then HIV definitely causes AIDS, and we're good with that, and then we're good at saying that the rest of you will definitely get this, but probably not, because if you have to be in a risk group, okay, all right, never mind about that. That's the mainstream. Or vaccines are perfectly safe, unless, of course, they're not for you, which means you probably have a genetic disposition for them not being safe, because of course they're safe. So that's the mainstream. Of course it sounds like double talk. Of course it sounds like horse shit. Of course, logical people know that doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, aren't there any better ideas? Of course there are better ideas. So why don't we have a second branch of science called non-orthodox science that's still allowed to publish, that doesn't have to pass, it doesn't have to be in the Lancet and the BMJ and NEJM and JAMA. It doesn't have to be in these standard journals. It can be in real journals that are taken seriously, that are more experimental and experiential. They're more based on experiments that live outside of the going concern. In business, we're more or less allowed to have competitive fields. You know, I mean, if I want to build a computer, I don't have to build IBM's old computer. I can more or less reinvent an operating system, which they can then steal. But still, there's more competition allowed in a commercial venture than there is in a medical venture. Why would that be? Are we not interested in the best ideas coming forward? There's an idea here. I mean, there really is. If we were serious, if science was serious about being courageous and brave and helping people, why wouldn't it open the doors, number one, to its critics? Because this is a big field of inquiry. Cancer, chemotherapy, HIV, vaccination, cosmology, all the rest. These big fields of inquiry. Stuff that a lot of people want to know about. But all we get is that capo down, you know, the capo di tutti capi. Well, Godfather, you know, I want to get into the sciences. Well, you can study chemotherapy. But I don't want to poison people with radiation. You're not going to be a scientist. Don't you think that there are... just imagine that we opened the doors for a day, just for a day, and said, hey, everybody out there who's got a better idea. Now, I know some of you will be whack jobs, some of you will be nutcases, some of you will be way out there and none of it will make sense. But some of you are going to come in with stuff that's so impressive and so resilient that we'll wonder why we weren't paying attention to it before. I mean, if our goal is curing cancer, or at least successfully treating cancer most of the time, and if our goal is preventing people from getting sick after having dozens and dozens and dozens of sexual partners and doing a ton of drugs, don't do that. And if our goal is making sure that all children don't get terrible diseases they can't recover from, then wouldn't we be interested in creating an open field of inquiry? Now, I know the mainstream has a lot at stake, and they're all worried about being hung, you know, from the gallows. They really are. They're worried about having their heads on pikes when it's revealed that what they've done is really hold up good ideas, stop good ideas from passing forward and putting forward rather, passing through and putting rather eugenic ideas that kill a lot of people forward. So they're afraid. They're afraid to do this. But what if we said, we don't hate science. We hate what you're doing that you call science because you don't allow any competition. You don't allow any competition. And I'm not talking about competition in your journal to see whose idea of dark matter can get funding this week, because they're both fake. I'm saying who has a truly better model of a cosmological of cosmology. So, is it plasma physics? Is it electric universe? Is it standard Big Bang cosmology? Who has the best idea? Don't put it forward to just the journal peer review authors who all have to pay their mortgages after memorizing all the stuff in the in the accepted way of doing it. By the way, the accepted way of doing it is 100-something years old, and what did they not know 100 years ago? Think about it. What did they not know? There was so much that they weren't aware of. Our model is 100 years old. Our model for vaccination is 150 years old. Our model for Big Bang is 100-something years old. It's back there with 300 years old with Isaac Newton and Immanuel Kant. It's too old. We know more now than they didn't even know that they didn't know then. Anyway, this is Liam Scheff. I'm just putting forward this idea to share with your friends who think that science is great and think that I'm anti-science. I'm not anti-science. I'm anti the stuff that the orthodoxy is doing. I think that we could do better. You can put $1 into PayPal. You can buy my book on Amazon.com. It's Official Stories. There's a diet war going on. If you go to the food section and diet and nutrition section of your local bookstore, and if you're lucky you have a local bookstore, not just Amazon.com, or if you go to that section of Amazon.com, you'll see, I think I counted 6 or 7 rows of books about how to eat the other day. My name's Liam Scheff. My book is Official Stories. This is American Heretic. Apparently Americans have no idea how to eat. Well, before we roll our eyes and shrug our shoulders and say how stupid we are stupid, but we've also been conditioned by poison. Sugar was put into our diet, I'm going to guess somewhere in the 1920s, but probably before in large scale, but certainly in the age of industry and of large-scale exportation from the South Seas and the equatorial zones where we grow all this kind of stuff in South America, Central America, etc., parts of Africa, and again, other islands, probably Hawaii. We then bring this stuff up, this terrible, terrible sugar. We refine it so that it's more pure, or really more refined and distilled than grain alcohol or cocaine, and we put it into our food. We deregulate every function of our body by eating a lot of sugar. This is how we're trained. This is how we grow up. I was an immense sugar addict. I had mood swings, something like out of, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf or something, at age, 5, 6. God, give me sugar. Okay, I'm fine. Oh, I feel depressed. Sugar screws us up for life. And then we get into a diet system where sugar is in everything. Sugar's in salsa. Sugar's in barbecue sauce. Sugar's in meat. It doesn't need to be. Sugar's in bread. Bread shouldn't have any sugar in it. It should be sourdough and taste sour, and the sour should be the delight that you take from it. That sour, meaning that it's full of good digestive enzymes and stimulates the liver to some degree. We shouldn't have sugar in everything, but we do. That's problem number one. We're raised in a problematic system, and we forget what appetite is. Sugar dismantles our appetite and makes us forget when we're hungry, because sugar feeds appetite. If just do an experiment, eat a day or 2 or 3 or 4 without any sweets at all, and even cut out some fruit, and see if your appetite doesn't go down to some sort of manageable level. Now, take the rice milk or milk or soy milk or whatever they make, chestnut milk, cashew milk, and take the unsweetened version and have a little. I guarantee you'll drink this much. Now put sugar in it. Or even, even for the sake of argument, put stevia in it, which is non-glycemic, but just for the sake of argument, put something really sweet in it. Now see how much more you'll want to drink. Sweetness makes us take in more and more and more food, and it is a problem. We have such a problem with sweets in our diet that we don't know what else to eat, and I can tell you that getting off of sugar was probably the hardest dietary transition that I made, and it took me years. I graduated from white sugar, okay, that's poison, I won't eat that. Brown sugar is the same as white sugar, I learned, except it has molasses, to then trying to have rice syrup and barley malt, which is sugar, and it maybe has a lower glycemic number on the glycemic index, but it's sugar, and it made me feel sick when I ate it. To, of course, fructose being in everything, and then cane sugar being in everything, and then carrot juice, okay, a little better, vegetable sugar, still kind of sweet, but a lot of carrot juice for a long time, so that I had yellow and orange palms. well, I suppose I had enough beta carotene. Hopefully, I was converting it into retinol. And then I just cut it out of anything that I could. And one day I realized I was drinking rice milk and soy milk, and it had grams and grams of sugar in it. I said, well, what are you doing? I thought you were healthy. I said to myself, okay, why am I eating that? And I switched to that, and then I took the non-sweetened versions of those things, and then I hardly wanted them anymore. Go figure. I really didn't want them anymore. I mean, once in a while to put into a dish with something else, but I just wanted to eat beans, grains, vegetables, good fats, good oils, little tiny bits of animal food and fats here and there, just little bits. And I felt, of course I felt better. And I dropped that nagging couple of pounds that I just couldn't seem to get rid of. And I guess sugar converts to fat very, very, very quickly. So sugar's hidden in our diet, and it's everywhere, and it's no wonder. And then come these sort of, nuclear power is good for you apologists. Sugar's not that bad. Sugar's gotten a bad rap. Sugar's good for your teeth. You'll see every version of sugar's not bad for you. Well, this is a huge lobbying group. It's also, I think, what we call, it's a confirmational bias. It's what we want to think, so we believe it. We had so much, and it can't be that bad for you. But you remember being a kid and pouring on so much sugar that the Cheerios had some sort of crunchy sand at the bottom that you would eat? I do. Our brains imprint this memory. The stuff that we eat when we're young is the stuff we want to eat when we're stressed when we get older. That's maybe the most important thing you can understand about diet, which is why I don't trust any fad diet at all, including the Sally Fallon version of Weston A. Price. Very different animals, by the way. And the Paleo diet. Both of these speak to me of people who had a lot of meat when they were growing up and just want more, rather than saying, yeah, okay, some animal foods, very healthful animal foods, and probably the moderate amounts that you get in a traditional society that had to share everything seem reasonable. But I remember eating a lot of meat as a kid. And when I became vegetarian, and then I sort of became unvegetarian, when I became vegetarian, though, of course, I wanted a lot of high protein foods. And it wasn't that my body needed it, that I thought that's what food was. Because when I was a kid, I ate sugar and meat. There weren't that many vegetables. There were potatoes. There were Ore-Ida potatoes. They were frozen. They came in a bag. There were frozen peas in a bag. That was probably the greenest vegetable I had for a number of years. Then I discovered Chinese food, and my life finally started. Because when I was a kid, Chinese food was the equivalent of vegetables. We didn't have vegetables in our standard American diet. Not really. It was very pathetic and sad. We internalize our childhood memory of food. So Captain Crunch, which isn't a food, which is actually a food-like product, as my friend Joni says, has fond memories for us. We remember it fondly. Reese's Pieces, people go, oh my God. I remember that my body goes, it's just too much. But Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, that was a different animal. Salty, fatty, well, there might have been some good things there, but the version that it came in was pure poison. And this is the difficulty we have, and I think why we have so many fad diets and so many misunderstandings of diet. We were all poisoned growing up, and so we're accustomed to poison. That point can't be made enough. When you have a craving and you're stressed, you may be remembering somewhere in your programmed brain from childhood that Hostess, or what was it, Entenmann's, or whatever the cake that you had that came in a little plastic bag, that wasn't really food, but you thought it was, and it was even given to us as a reward, which was terrible, a terrible, terrible thing to do. So all of our confirmation of self when we were young tended to be, if you come from any kind of typical American, Germanic, Jewish, Chinese family, we all get rewarded with food, and we all get rewarded with sweets, and so we run to these things, and then we have a hard time having a normal, healthy diet. Well, I'll talk more about the various kinds of diets in upcoming little talks, these little 10-minute talks. There is the Weston A. Price, there's the Paleo diet, there's the vegan diet, there's the vegetarian octo-lava-pesce, whatever diet, pescatarian. And then there's the Michael Pollan group that says that we're omnivores and we have to find our way in and among that. I studied macrobiotics, and it was very helpful. Macrobiotics shouldn't be a diet, it shouldn't be a brown rice diet, but it should be an understanding that our bodies require a balance of energies during the day. And this has been a nice anchor to hold on to, that we need some things with protein and fiber, and some things with carbohydrates and vitamins and minerals. And if you have animal foods, take them in moderation. This was the lesson that we took. Take animal foods in moderation. Not at all, but in a sustainable way, as though you lived among a group of people that you had to share with. It's not a bad lesson. It's not be a hardened vegan and think that killing animals is wrong. Maybe it is, but maybe it is what human beings have always done. And maybe because it does inflict a little bit of pain on an animal, maybe we should eat lower on the food chain to less developed animals. Maybe. Just saying maybe. At least it's food for thought. The hardest thing about America, though, is that we're poisoned when we're young, and so we can't sort out our food brains when we get old. So whatever you eat, you're going to have to struggle against what you were fed when you were young versus what your body actually needs. And I leave what your body actually needs as a fairly open question with a lot of good research out there that I hope we will talk about on the next episode. My name's Liam Scheff. This is American Heretic. Put a couple dollars into the PayPal if you enjoyed this message of food, well, philosophical food discussion. Again, macrobiotics is what I studied in a book that I really like is called Healing with Whole Foods, which I think is on balance more balanced than 99% of what's out there. See you next time. Watch out, New York, it's malathion part 2. Yes, more Latin American people are trying to kill you just by breathing. This is Liam Scheff, author of Official Stories. This is American Heretic. The Zika virus, which I doubt has ever been substantially even confirmed in anything other than the most speculative laboratory stunts of finding, well, who knows? They don't really need anything to claim that they have a virus, has been blamed for a lot of different stuff, including many birth defects in South American countries, Brazil, deep in the rainforest, where some doctors are complaining that industry is spraying very deadly pesticides, which they are, but of course those are perfectly safe. I know this because when I looked up Zika and larvicide being what is being blamed by the locals for the problems in Brazil, and Zika, which is being blamed by the international community of petrochemical salespeople for what is happening in Brazil, I found the truth. Oh, hold on. The truth. The truth. And the truth is found on Snopes and Huffington Post, of course. What a repository for... and Fortune. Always a bellwether of reasonable claims about science and industry. Fortune magazine never saw a fracking field that it didn't want to plunder to kill all the locals. I mean, help them. I mean, kill them by poisoning. I mean, by helping their water supply with carcinogenic. I mean, no chemicals. So, if you go and you look up larvicide and Zika, you will find that Snopes has its usual 10 pages of rambling, discursive bullshit that kind of ends up saying, no, not much. The Huffington Post comes out in the normal newspeak of the NYU journalism school, blaming anybody who doesn't believe the benign industry that gave us DDT, PCBs, everything that Monsanto ever produced, saccharin, NutraSweet, glyphosate, the list goes on and on and on. Hello, St. Louis. Yes, if we don't believe them, we're, of course, anti-science, and scientific consensus is always to be trusted. Now, let me back off from the single point of view that says that this is just an industry ploy to poison us with more and more shit, and look at history a little bit. Human history is a calamity of disaster, disease, waterborne disease. Mosquitoes are insects that carry disease. They certainly carry malaria. And so it seems reasonable that mosquitoes are not our best friend, and we should do everything we can to avoid what they call standing water, which is not water that stands up, but water that just sits there. They probably call it sitting water, really dirty water. What else? Of course, they want to stop people who are Latin American from having sex. Yes, Governor, what is it? Who's the guy in charge now in New York? DeComio? I can't remember. Let's call him DeComio. The guy in New York, DeComio, is now, whoever it is putting, getting millions of dollars of government funding. It's the best thing you can do with government funding, to hire, I think, 50 new employees to make sure that Latin American people don't have sex. Well, also to look for the sitting water, or standing, was it what I remember, the still water. Still waters do apparently not run as deep as maybe they should. They're blaming sex for Zika, which is interesting. There's really no way to know what somebody gets from sex. unless you're there at the moment and before and after and know specifically what you're looking for, that they probably don't have a good test for Zika is, well, that's just the way they work. They don't have a good test for anything. They know that you have it because, and this is the important point, they say that it's going around, and so anybody with flu-like symptoms has the new disease du jour. Yes, when it was swine flu, all you had to do was go, my nose feels, oh, it's swine flu. When it was bird flu, you said, my butt feels, oh, it's bird flu. When it was the galloping snail flu, all you had to say was, my eye feels a little, oh, it's a galloping snail flu, you need a vaccine. Vaccine propaganda has maybe worn itself out a little with the American public to some degree. There's the whole, vaxxed problem going on right now, in which it's kind of being made clear that the CDC knew that vaccines, yes, cause brain damage and developmental damage in children and hid it, but that couldn't have anything to do with the fact that they're just saying this thing is an emergency and so they can just aerially spray us with Bt toxin. No, these things would never be related. God, it's such a conspiracy theory. I got to stop thinking like a conspiracy theorist and just accept that a virus that they haven't purified or isolated, that they don't have a test for, that they say is asymptomatic in 80% of cases, must be the single cause, even when they're spraying all kinds of larvicides down there and there are independent doctors and researchers raising a furor. I mean, the underdogs down there are saying, hey, you're spraying all kinds of stuff in the jungle that you never used to spray before, and it seems to have coincided with this outbreak of children being born with this particular birth defect, even though the birth defect, if you don't measure carefully when you're young, you actually accuse a lot of normal babies of having the birth defect, therefore raising and increasing the numbers of people that you say have the birth defect. And even though there are no mosquitoes in New York, nobody's found any of this particular breed, genre, subspecies of mosquito in New York, it's best that we just spray people from the sky. I can't see anything that could possibly go wrong here. More malathion for everybody. And this should put to rest the idea that people spray things from the sky on us that we don't want to have sprayed because, well, actually I think I have that in reverse. Maybe, anyway, let's leave that's a conspiracy theory, the chemtrail thing. Let's go back to the human history. The human history is, to be fair to the scientist people who sigh when they listen to us talk because we're so stupid. Sigh, we have to listen to you, we're scientists. You and your concerns about petrochemical carcinogens like glyphosate. It's perfectly safe. That's why we put it on all your food without telling you, you stupid guinea pigs. The human species has been a long disaster of, waterborne disease. It's true. You can't get around it. There are things that we did in the 20th century, even a little in the 19th, mostly in the 20th century, to stop that from happening. It was called the toilet, I think, and the toilet gave way into a sewage system. This is very scientific-ish stuff. So the toilet and the sewage system took the things that cause disease away from our houses. I know, it's very scientificist, and it's difficult for scientists to understand because they don't get to make any petrochemicals to spray us with. I know the world has been ravaged by diseases and plagues. The interesting thing is none of those were stopped, prevented, or impeded in any way by any kind of medical treatment. When a true plague came along, it wiped out a certain portion of the population and then disappeared. When we put sewage and, what was that other thing, toilets and sanitation in place, these concepts that are difficult for scientists who are so bored with all of us that they just can't listen to us. Thank God they own the Huffington Post that can write, it's untrue, it's a conspiracy theory, you're not a scientist, you don't understand what we're saying. No, we really don't, because glyphosate's a carcinogen and DDT was safe until it wasn't it? DDT was perfectly safe, just like thalidomide was perfectly safe until it wasn't. Sorry about that. Sorry, everybody. It's perfectly safe until it's not. Malathion's perfectly safe. Whoops. Maybe, actually, highly toxic neurotoxins and all the things, tetratogen, all the things that can, carcinogens, all the things that can get into our system, they're perfectly safe until they're not. So that's why a lot of us go, hello, wait, just before you spray us all, can we just talk about the sitting water thing and maybe the sewage and the sanitation and the toilets are good enough and maybe we can't actually blame sex for something that is happening in the jungle where people are spraying intensely toxic. I know they've been tested in theory, but as the great Michael Crichton said, nature finds a way. And maybe tetratogens and carcinogens find a way too, when they're put into actual nature. And maybe there are unintended consequences. Maybe there is something called the law of unintended consequences. Maybe this has been an understood part of human civilization for a long time, and maybe we should be thinking about the law of unintended consequences before we do mass spraying events. But of course we won't, because we're not scientists. They're so bored with us. We're so stupid for thinking about toxic chemicals. We're so anti-science for thinking about the effects, the actual effects of toxic chemicals, instead of believing that it's something that they can't test for, that they say for some reason is 80% totally ineffective in the human population, manages to cause terrible birth defects in some people for some reasons, even though that kind of looks like fetal alcohol syndrome and other things that could happen. And maybe they're not measuring the heads correctly, therefore they have to change their numbers. But the fear is out there. And once the fear is out there, all we can really do is trust them. Smoke them if you got them. My name is Liam Scheff. My book is Official Stories. This is American Heretic. You can put a couple dollars into the PayPal kitty to support actual independent science journalism. See you next time. I have a challenge for my Paleo friends. My name is Liam Scheff, author of Official Stories. This is American Heretic. Paleo people think that there was an ideal human diet, and that ideal human diet occurred sometime in the Paleolithic, long period of time, before writing, before towns, before civilization, whatever you think of it, and most importantly, before farming. This is interesting. There's a lot to be said by looking at the human species before we became embedded into a particular cultural way of being or a particular area. We were, you could say, at our most natural. We were hunters and gatherers. We were gatherers and foragers for the most part. We went around from place to place as food was available. There were very few of us on Earth, and there were very few of us in any particular area. Animals, on the other hand, ran wild all over the Earth, and there were plenty of them. So we did eat what we could catch. The ancient, as far as we can tell from modern tribes, people in tribes don't like to work very hard to hunt. So, for example, they may throw a little bit of a narcotic into a little area of a stream, closed-off area of a stream, and sedate the fish so they can just pick them up and pull them out. Well, you don't have to be a really tough hunter to do that, and it lets you know that we're kind of a lazy species that doesn't like to get hurt. Then there are the natives who swam in the lakes and grabbed the feet of ducks and waterfowl and pulled them under so that they would be sedated and drowned, and that's how they caught them. Again, we don't like to work too hard. So it's not that we didn't eat meat, and the paleo diet is meat-centric, lean meats. It's that we weren't chasing Godzilla or Tyrannosaurus Rex or the giant, most dangerous stampeding animal that we could. Well, they'll say, well, there is evidence that we, stampeded, in whatever you want to call it, gazelle or other kinds of animals in Africa. Yes, there's evidence of that. It's also an area that's very inhospitable to any kind of farming, so you got to survive, and so you eat what's there. The Maasai, for example, drink milk and blood and eat meat. They die fairly young, and they do have a lot of the heart problems, atherosclerosis, that you would expect to see in people who eat a lot of saturated fat. The paleo people are not immune to doing research, they just don't do it fairly. And like the Weston A. Pricers and the vegans to some degree, although the Weston A. Price and the paleo people are more guilty of this than anybody, and perhaps the Weston A. Price people are the most guilty, they point, but they don't take the 3 fingers back, Like when you point 3 fingers at yourself, right? So when you point at somebody and you say, your grain is bad because it only contains vitamins, minerals, and carbohydrates, and some fats, but it also contains some anti-nutrients. In other words, some things that are digested and that bind with some of the nutrients when you digest them. In other words, you don't get 100% of the vitamins in it, So you get some of it. Even if you get 50, it seems to be a pretty good deal to me, because you can run your body on these things in a fairly low toxic way versus trying to eat protein or just fat for fuel. Carbohydrates, turn into the sugar that our body likes to digest without the problems of just eating sugar. So they don't point the finger back and say, yeah, we hate you carbohydrates, we hate you beans, we hate you phytase and leptins, is it leptins? And yet, we're not going to point the finger back at ourselves and say, yeah, excess protein is a real problem in the body, and yeah, we'll probably all get stones. And yes, the saturated fats are definitely a problem. Well, the paleo people might say that. But I want to ask the paleo people to take themselves very seriously for a moment. Let's say that you're right. Let's say that the best diet that we can have is a foraging and hunting diet based on that of our distant ancestors. Not the 10,000 or so years of farming and agriculture, 8, 10,000, 12,000 years, depending on, if you look at Göbekli Tepe, you have to even push it back further to when human civilization might have started or been interrupted in and around ice ages or other events. We don't really know. What we can say is that civilization seems to go like this, and then ice age calamity goes down, and then comes back up, and then ice age calamity goes back down. So we have no idea how many cycles of life have happened and civilization have happened on Earth. By the way, radiometric dating is just about useless when you have strong electromagnetic events. It's not really worth very much. So let's ask the paleo people to take themselves seriously. We say that, okay, the best diet is that diet that we had as foragers and hunters. Okay, maybe. Maybe it's the best diet that we ever had, except that it was the only diet we had. It was the only way that we could eat. We had to be foragers and hunters. And then we said we like to eat these foods, and we planted them in one place and inbred them. And through the magic of inbreeding, the magic that's somehow in the genome to produce bigger, slower, fatter versions of what we like, kind of programmatic. It's interesting, isn't it? How the universe plays that game with us. Then we got even more of what we liked with less work and with less hardship. So which was the better diet? The one that could feed enough people to make a civilization with, or the one that couldn't? Or the one that kept us in very small groups, essentially living a communist lifestyle? Everybody shares an equal amount. That's what tribes that live very, close to subsistence lives do. They're essentially communist in the pure form of communal. They all have to share an equal amount, which makes it fair. But they have to share an equal amount because on any particular day somebody might not have as much. You also have to look at what tribal life is actually like. If you're going to aggrandize the idea that we hunted animals sometimes and then we picked things out of the ground and smashed them and spit in them to digest them and left them for a couple of days and then squeezed out what we could eat, which happens all over the world in tribes, you have to also ask what happens in tribes. And tribes tend to practice a number of things that we're not really fond of. One is eugenics, pure eugenics, infanticide. If somebody's not going to make it, if somebody's born with any kind of serious enough issue that they'll not be a provider but rather a suck on the the resources of the community, they're starved. They're not fed. They're exposed, left out to die and be taken by animals. This is the way the human species practiced population management for its entire lifespan. I mean the lifespan of the human species, talking millions of years as far as anybody can tell. The other thing that tribes practiced is cannibalism. Cannibalism is something that occurred all over the world, from the whitest of the white to the darkest of the dark, regardless. There was no particular religious group. It's something that occurred. People ate people who probably weren't in their tribe because they were the other. I hope that, Mark's Daily Apple doesn't talk about the benefits of just eating a little bit of your neighbor's flesh. Probably not. Probably they'll steer clear of that. But if paleo people really took themselves seriously, they would have to admit that trying to model a Paleolithic lifestyle is not something we'd really want to do. It's brutal, it's hard, it's totally devoted to one thing, which is running around, finding food, and maintaining small tribe stability. It means you have a small tribal leader, you have whatever cultic nature beliefs that you have, and you rarely interact with other people. And you wander around a barely populated planet filled with animals. That's not where we live. And we don't have enough animals to let everybody go on animal stampedes, gorge themselves, and then not eat for a month. Just eat grass for a month because, they killed all the animals. it's not a sustainable way of life. Of course, the Weston A. Price, the Sally Fallon version of it, and the paleo people aren't concerned about sustainability. They're really I, me, mine. This is what I want it now. Now, vegans are so allergic, of course, to the habits of humanity because they are disturbing. And I think that vegans have been so turned off. I could speak for myself when I was more practicing that. I'm more of a macrobiotic person. But, when I dipped my toes into that, I was just repulsed by the factory farming system. And to their credit, the Weston Price Foundation, Sally Fallon group, claimed to be repulsed by the factory farming group. The paleo people, not as much. I've seen paleo people will go to McDonald's and leave the buns behind, go to Burger King and leave the buns, or Wendy's and leave the buns behind, go to Sizzler. That's not a healthful diet. All protein shouldn't be considered created equal in terms of the toxins that it carries with it. Also, hunted into extinction are the animals that we used to run around with in the long Paleolithic era. I guess if I went to talk to paleo people, I want to ask them to stop worrying so much about the little so-called anti-nutrients and to just be normal again. Just eat some grains, organic, and just eat some beans, organic, and eat a little bit of meat. But you don't need so much meat as you probably do the fat-soluble vitamins and some of the things, even in the organs, like the livers. Go low on the food chain. I bet you'll be just as healthy. I'd like to see what happens. I'm just sharing it with you for your consideration. My name is Liam Scheff. My book is Official Stories. This is American Heretic. Talking about this is always gets me into trouble somewhere with somebody, but let's have a go anyway. We're not the world's most monogamous species. Now, I'm going to say up front that I'm not advocating that you not be monogamous if you're happy being monogamous, or even if you're unhappy being monogamous. I'm not advocating that you do anything without a conversation with your significant other. I'm also not advocating loose polyamory in which you do anything, let's use the word willy-nilly, or without circumspection and great consideration. I'm instead trying to talk about the nature of the species, and also the economic arrangement that we have put ourselves in the modern era, the era of petrol industry, coal, oil, and industry. Let's start with the concept of what I mean by monogamy. I don't mean to say that we don't pair bond and form long-term affiliations. We clearly pair bond and form long-term affiliations. We love people for life. Whether we can remain with them for life is almost irrelevant to the point that we are attached to people for life. We love for long periods of time. And once we love somebody, we'll always probably think of them in that way of love and fondness. Even if you've had a terrible breakup, after the wounds have healed, you might even be mad at them because you still love them, him or her. Or it, I suppose, you could break up with. Well, that's your business. Okay, let's keep it on the human scale. Monogamy, then, isn't the idea that you don't love someone for life or that you stay with them for a long time. I don't also mean that we're not capable of being sexually, use the word, faithful. No, I want to challenge the concept of that meaning a little bit during this talk. I think that when people meet and they fall in love, they have very little desire to be with anybody else. That's part of the discovery of each other. You become enraptured by the other person's, person. In every aspect, you seem to delight with every turn of the leaf of personality, and even the fights reveal new depths which you can conquer together. After that bonding process is over, you may begin to realize your plan. Anybody who stays together has a project that they're going to do together, whether it's children or a business or something. Everybody who gets together and stays together has something that they do, managing a household, keeping something stable for other people, like children. These are very important things. And the human species needs things to be stable on the small scale. Couples manage to do that. But we have to admit that we are first tribal in nature, and we didn't arrive here as human beings and emerge from from non-existence into existence as a coupling species, but rather as a tribal species. So we had many people around us who would keep the foundations relatively steady. And if one person got flaky, we had all these other people, and when this person became flaky, this person was no longer flaky, and we could always add new people. And we could have a pretty stable mat, despite individual perturbations to go through life with. So it wasn't necessarily meaningful to bond with one person for life and never look at another person. In fact, that would have been isolating you from the group and created many, many problems. Why are you isolating? We need this person has to interact with all of us. Now you have to talk about sex. Why does sex have to come into it? That's a question you have to take up with, the creator of all things, or whatever you think made us, Anunnaki, Yahweh, Brahma, whatever it is, or nature, or the electromagnetic force that births all things, the Tao, whatever you think created us, made us to be a very sexual creature. And we think about sex a lot. In fact, if you're somebody in a long-term coupling relationship, you can go, and even if you're not, but you can go read the studies about people in long-term coupling relationships. They tend to feel more sexually attracted to their partner when they're permitted to flirt outside of their relationship. And even sometimes people in slightly open relationships have better sexual relationships at home. Now that may sound absolutely distasteful to you, and I understand that. It is an uncomfortable thought to consider in the world in which we were raised, in which nobody but sluts and whores, and of course everybody when nobody's watching, thinks about that sort of thing. Of course we all go home to our triple scoop ice cream sundae of sex on television. Nobody considers that cheating, and nobody really thinks about what that means to us psychologically. But it means a lot. It means that we can continue to be sexual creatures without violating the incredibly punitive and restrictive Judeo-Christian, well, again, that's not quite right, because the Judeo-Christian laws really only had to do with what women could do, and much less to do with what men could do. And that quality, that difference between men and women and their sexual appetites and lives was essentially embedded in Victorian constitutional analysis of what people were, and women were meant to be something, and men were meant to be something. Of course, all the trips to the doctor with the magic fingers should have proven that wrong. And the truth is, we're just a very sexual species. Now, we're very healthy and happy when we're allowed to express that. I don't mean express it, use the word willy-nilly again. If we express it without consideration, then we're inconsiderate, and we may in fact be belligerent and unwanted and really vile. But if we express it with consideration, that is with conversation and with care and consent and, in adult relationships, meaningful relationships, we may feel very, very healthy and happy. We may have a partner who is the central partner for what we do most of the time, and then have people who we feel affections for, who we feel attractions to. This is tantamount to the greatest heresy in our culture, to admit that we might have attractions and affections outside of the person that we live with. For some reason, this is difficult for us to talk about. When I say it out loud, you're probably saying, well, it doesn't seem that unreasonable that you find other people attractive, but you don't have to do anything about it. So we immediately rush back to the safety of our Judeo-Christian programming, for which we were wrapped on the knuckles and frankly beaten. It had to be beaten into us. Don't do that or you're a whore. Don't do that or you're a whore. The guys were told, play around, sow your wild oats. The girls were tended to be told, don't do that, you're a whore. Fortunately, I grew up at times in parts of Boston, and it was quite liberated, and girls did what they wanted, and I always appreciated that. If they liked you, they told you. You didn't have to play the long waiting game of the more Protestant and occluded Presbyterians, and you didn't have to go to Lake Wobegon, that kind of relationship where you just pretend, and go out on the lake ice fishing so you don't blow your brains out because you get so sick of each other. Any two people, as Jean-Paul Sartre will tell you in Huis Clos, or what's that called, No Exit, will tell you that any two or three people will want to kill each other in a matter of days if they only spend time with each other. It doesn't matter how engaging they are in the first hours or days of their relationship. We have a limited tolerance for other people's quirks and personalities. That's not a criticism of any particular person. It's the way we are. And we also have a lot of trouble admitting that. We think that we let people down if we say, no, I love blueberry, but I've had enough blueberry for now. I need to go have some chocolate, strawberry, vanilla, paprika, whatever. Just to change and cleanse the palate. Those of us familiar with diets know that we have to change and rotate our diet on a regular basis, or we frankly become sick and deadened to the impulse of life and bored. We have to have variety. I'm not saying that you have to go screw a variety of people to be a healthy person. What I am suggesting, and I've suggested it before, is that we would be a healthier species if we, with the people that we cared about, could simply admit that we find people attractive, that people can excite and enliven us. In fact, if people don't excite and enliven us, then what in the world should? Money? Objects? I think we lose we lose touch. As my very dear friend Benny Wills of the Joy Camp says, people in life are the prize. People is what you get. People is what we have to care about. It's very difficult for people to talk about this within relationships where there's a lot on the line, where you have several children or many children or a couple or huge debts together, huge investments, because we're afraid culturally. We've been programmed Judeo-Christianly to live inside of little bubbles in which the house is banded by the relationship, and any stepping outside of that is supposed to totally destroy that, destroy the safety of the web that you two people created so that you could support children. Well, remember, we're actually tribal, and we really are supposed to support each other. I think regardless of, once you're in a relationship for a while, you frankly owe the person that you've spent a lot of time with a certain amount of loyalty to their well-being. And I don't mean that you owe them sex. I mean that you owe them loyalty to their well-being. And should two people find that they've graduated from, the school of early romance into the long school of adult responsibilities, and that they need some other things in their lives, I think that they still owe each other loyalty to that project. And that project is very often a family, but it might as well be a business. I hope this isn't too confusing or too scandalous for any of you. I think we're headed back to a more tribal way of life, come hook or crook, and I'd like us to be a little more forgiving than Leviticus and the Old Testament about it, so that we can have more adult conversations and not constantly let the old Catholics crucify us for our cares and for being human. There's a story out in the mainstream press, even though you probably haven't seen it, out last month, which was April, the end of April 2016, that said that our oil allotment, which is of course our God-given right as Americans to have as much oil as we need, is actually, our worldwide oil allotment is actually about half of what we were promised. Not because anybody's holding it back, but because the estimates were all lies. My name is Scheff. My book is Official Stories. This is American Heretic. If you want to see my work on oil, you can go look up The Oil Alarm, and there are some clips on YouTube. The whole film will be available this fall. It's only 17 minutes. It's animated by Eric Rogerson, and it's quite good, if I do say so myself. We thought that we had 1.5 trillion or more barrels of oil worldwide. Well, that should be a sufficient amount to get us through until we're all dead, and then maybe the kids are halfway through their lives, and then that's not really our problem anymore. We run a society that runs on, America runs on about 19 million barrels of oil per day. A barrel of oil is worth, in heat units, called British thermal units, 5.8 million. That is roughly equivalent to 10 to 15,000 hours of human labor. Divide to get that in days and years, and if you do that, you can get 5 to 7 years of somebody doing a day job, 5 days a week, weekends off, 8 hours a day. A barrel of oil is then worth 5 to 7 years of a day job, and we use 19 million, let's call it 20 million a day. So let's say that it's worth 5 years and we use 20 million a day, then we do 100 million barrel years of work per day, just in the United States. Around the world, we use about 90 million barrels of oil per day. That's a lot of work being done per day. Hundreds of millions of years of labor being done. Doing what, you might ask? Well, pushing the Federal Express truck that has your overnight delivery of, I don't know, the paleo meat that came from Australia that you so desperately need for your diet, because God forbid you should eat a little lower on the food chain and eat some local little animals, or maybe take a chance and eat beans once in a while, just once in a while. Not so that you actually have a heart attack eating beans, which of course, never mind, that's a different story. We use a lot of oil. In fact, most of it you could say we use for purposes that are fatty. Most of the oil we use in the country could be replaced by conservation. That is, we could decide that overnight delivery wasn't very important, that we weren't going to all drive cars everywhere, but we were going to, with great haste, put in electrified rail systems all over the major routes where the big highways now are, and that we could wait for an hour to wait for a train to go somewhere, and then spend more time there, which would be a happier place to be because it would be built for people who are taking trains to be comfortable, and to have restaurants and maybe some growing fields and other things like that. But we don't do that. and we don't have any growing fields near us because we're used to being able to take trucks from 3,500 miles away and drive them across the country in a couple of days to bring us, a few days, to bring us the carrots that we all need from California. So if you're in Florida or Maine, it's very important that you have California carrots, even though the aquifers in California are being drained to grow foods that don't naturally grow in a desert. The report that came out said that the estimates on oil were about doubled. We have about half of what we thought, so we're somewhere in the, I think, the estimate now is that we have some 800-something billion barrels of oil, possibly, probably, worldwide. Is it all recoverable? That's another question. Because while there may be oil in an oil reef, it may be 3 miles under the ocean, and we'll never get it. Or the oil may be very, very sticky stuff, like the stuff that's burning in Canada, and may destroy a great deal of life in, well, I don't want to be too dramatic, but we'll see how long that fire goes on and what it does to the atmosphere. And the fact that it's burning in an increasingly large area, I think I read that it was as big as New York, shouldn't be of a concern to anybody because, of course, there's always more oil. But that's what the report is saying. No, and the reason we were going after tar rather than the cheap, light, sweet crude, called sweet because it's not full of sulfur and it's easier to use, not because it tastes yummy, but because it's easier to use and isn't bitter and sour, sour oil, which contains a lot of sulfur, arsenic, lead, other problematic metals. We're out of that stuff. We're out of the stuff that we built the world on. Well, quick history of oil. The United States was in constant oil discovery from 1901, at which point Spindletop gave hundreds of thousands of barrels per day, all the way through the 1930s. The Kern oil fields of California, which gives a more sulfuric oil, but there was plenty of it, a heavier oil, to the East Texas oil fields, which were gold, which gave us oil through the 1930s, powered us through World War II, built New York City, built the highways and freeways of the United States in the 50s and 60s. The oil that came from Texas built the United States in the way that we see it today. Then Saudi oil had to keep the United States running in the way that we see it today. We're out of that stuff. What we're running on now is more expensive, stickier, more full of the sulfur and the metals that are harder to, make it harder to refine. We have to go deeper to get it. And you say, so what's the problem? The problem is it becomes unrecoverable at a certain point, and that's what this report was telling us. It was telling us that the major oil suppliers to the world, the major oil companies, have all overestimated their stock. They look in an area and they say, we estimate that there may be, 20 billion barrels in this area. Then they go and dig it, and they say, well, we're getting some good results. There may be 50 billion barrels for us to get here. Then the prospectus goes out to all the investors. There are 50 billion barrels of oil right under this area of the ocean. We can get all of it. 6 years later, they've finished all of the operations. They're down to the sticky stuff. They've gotten 18 billion barrels of oil, and they have to close up shop. There is still oil under the ground, but you would have to remove the ocean and set out many nuclear charges that didn't contaminate the area with radiation. Now people in the investment industry on Wall Street say, can we do that? Can we remove that ocean and then set nuclear charge? No, we can't. We actually have to still live on this planet. It's not just a husk for us to burn, even though you think it is. And of course Wall Street is, or the Wall Street mentality is, of course, what's wrong with the world. We just think that everything is burnable and that we can still live here, but we can't. We actually have to still live here. The problem that we face isn't just that we won't be able to have enough oil to, well, keep that many thousand-mile trucking line going all the time. It's that we won't even be able to keep the industrial society going that wastes all of the energy that we waste. We will have to become conservationists very, very, very soon. I think the whole global warming movement is actually kind of an allergic pre-reaction to us running lower on fossil fuels. They're saying, we can't tell you that we have to conserve, so we'll tell you we can be really good people. Put on your little angel wings and be, against global warming, which means we have to stop using as many fossil fuels. So you'll see arguments about fossil fuels saying we have to leave a lot of it in the ground to stop global warming. Not at all. We can't get it out of the ground because we can't afford to. The cost of getting it out of the ground is much higher than the cost, than the value of the energy in the oil. That's the reality. The CO2 thing has long been irrelevant. We long bypassed their scary 400 number, and it didn't affect global temperatures in any way. Their models are all over the place. They're now burying the heat somewhere in the ocean instead of saying, yes, we're not modeling it correctly, but the reality is that our relationship with fossil fuels has to change because it's not an infinite supply. This is the Liam Scheff Show on UCY TV, Truth Frequency Radio. Please support the show by buying official stories at Amazon.